What is the methodological and historical roots of the frequent motif of Makli graveyard means lotus flower in the artistic work of Iran and Sindh? The result of this research is the reestablishment of one of the roots of commonality among the peoples of the two lands. Introduction. People of Iran and Sindh have been in close racial and kinship connection and affinity since long ago, and in their continual existence, they have always been in good relation and trace. The remains achieved from two lands, famous civilization of Mohenjo-daro and Shahr-e-Sukhte and other ancient sites such as Amri, Nal, and Kuli in Pakistan, and Tape-Sialk, Tape-Yahya, and Tape-Sar in Iran show many authentic evidence. Further, the transit of one of the most important branches of Silk Road via China to Sindh and its continuation to the southeast of Iran and its going on the coast of Makran and the Persian Gulf as connecting to Anatolia is another evidence to indicate a relationship between Iran and Sindh. In the time of Achaemenid Empire, 550 BC, this relationship was too strong. For instance, the 16th satrapy or province of Iran, which is approved by Avesta, the holy book of Zoroastrian, was named Hepta Hindu region, and the remnant is still available in ancient city of Taxila. The founding of the excavation of this hill has kept in Taxila Museum, and all such evidence are remnants of long relationship and friendship between the land of Persia and ancient Sindh. More research, investigation, and spending hours is needed to explain the history of this relationship. But whatever I need to present in this short time is a new research which will add new insight into the most frequent themes used in graves of ancient and historical city of Makli. This research tries to explain the picture of lotus, which has been used frequently as a theme in Makli graveyard. Furthermore, this motif will be compared with the similar kinds in carving of Persepolis in Achaemenid period and the pictures used in Sassanid era, particularly they use picture on earthenware of the southern eastern Iran named Golpuregan region. The result of this research shows mythological and historical roots of this motif in the artistic work of Iran and Sindh, and also shows the relation of using that in the region civilization of Iran and Sindh. Furthermore, it emphasizes on the vast cultural and deep artistic interaction between Iran and Sindh. Lotus, the most frequent motif in Makli graves in comparison Iran sites. Visiting ancient site of Makli and the examination of its architecture of graves and their motifs show that the most frequent picture is related to the shape of flowers and petals, which is quite reminiscent of lotus flower. Perhaps some of historians and archaeologists have not agreed with this claim, but I believe that the precision in designing pictures undoubtedly is various illustration of lotus. As it is said in this paper, this flower is symbol of existence. It is symbol of sun as well as the eternal purity. However, man's beliefs in the beginning of the East civilization have reverence for praising sun, and finally Mithraism dominated Iran and subcontinent. The silker shape of 24 rays of sun has seen in civilization such as Mohenjo-daro, West Sindh, Shahr-e-Sukhte, Bampur, Takht-e-Jamshid, Sialk, and etc. If you go to the stone graves, you can see the shape of sun. And the next of that, you can see the shape of lotus flower. And if you go to Shahr Sukhte, it started with swastika, and step by step it changed to be a lotus flower. And in Shahr Sukhte also we have swastikas. Yes, it is the simple shape of that, and step by step it's changed to lotus flower. If you go to Persepolis, the pillars, exactly the base of the pillars is the shape of this flower. And if you go the Fars province, the base of the pillar is vice versa of this flower, and it step by step went to the China, and 500 after that, it became the coach of Buddha, or Buddha's coach. And if you go to the Mohenjo-daro, it is started on the earthenware, very simple shape of that. And if you come in Makli graveyard, tomb of Jam Nizamuddin possesses the finest ornamental carvings, consists the relief on the walls and representing half and full lotuses and arc panels set with sunflowers. In Chowkhandi, you can also see this one. And also, if you go to the Fort of Lahore, the two pillar of entrance is also shape of this flower, especially in the base of the pillars. And if you go to the Persepolis, you can see the shape of this sunflower. We can call it lily, eastern lily. And in firebox in the Sassanid area, you can also see this flower. And if you go to the Sistan of Iran, the carpet, Baluchi carpet also show this one, but it is in a square. But this square has two square in there, and also two square also is there, and it has 16 and 24 of angles. It means that 24 rays of sun. I come to discussion and conclusion. This question perhaps would be the preoccupation of critics, that why architects and designers of Makli's graveyard have used such a picture at large, and in fact, where has been the origin of this symbol? The study of Aryan's history and their beliefs, and with reference to Avesta, and also the findings in Persepolis indicate that this flower has been connected to beliefs of Aryans who had migrated to Persia around 2100 BC or so. This belief came into Iran along with Aryans. Later, a large group of Aryans migrated to subcontinent and spread the same belief. On the other hand, are the enterwares found on Mohenjo-daro, which dates back to pre-advent of Aryans in subcontinent. The picture of this flower has used in the shape of circle and swastika. With this description, however, precise and exact origin of this symbol cannot be determined. Only it is believed that the symbol had crucial effect in large relationship between people of Iran and Sindh. This symbol has later used in Islamic architecture through Iran and Sindh. The reason why this symbol used a lot in Makli is first due to its sacred shape, and then holiness of Makli's cemetery, which is the burial ground of the mystic scholars of religion, as well as the kings and prominent figures of Sindh. Thank you for your attention.
So now we have a next presentation by Ms. Rand Epic, He is going to talk about an international perspective on recent tangible and intangible conservation efforts at Makli.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the Government of Sindh, Department of Archaeology, and the Endowment Trust for the invitation. I came first to Makli 1 year ago, and I was incredibly impressed by the architecture that was here. But at the same time, I was a bit dismayed by the state of the buildings, the state of conservation. Makli is an impressive site. It's very photogenic. And I spent a lot of my time taking photographs of these wonderful monuments while I was discouraged at the same time because of the state of conditions. I'm an architect, conservation architect, and I have worked in numerous places. And I have never seen the level of advancement in the conservation in this last year in other places. So I'm quite impressed at what has been happening here in 1 year. When I first came a year ago, I read all of the UNESCO reports, starting in 2006, 2007, 2009, up to 2016. And these were the reactive monitoring missions, the state of conservation reports, and they all sounded very negative to me. But then even going back to the original World Heritage nomination, it mentioned problems even in 1981 and 1982. So these problems existed a long time ago. The reactive monitoring mission report in 2012 said there's significant concern on the part of the World Heritage Committee. And it's the universal values, outstanding universal values are threatened. And I had read these before I arrived, and I was quite scared about what the situation would be, how I would find Makli. There were management issues. There was no security. There was problems with the border wall, illegal encroachment. There was no visitor control. The rubbish was out of control. There were also conservation concerns. There were no conservation standards. There was illegal settlements within the site. There was a differential settlement at Jam Nizamuddin. There's a lot of significant cracks, incomplete work at some monuments, and insufficient documentation. So when I read these documents a year ago, I was quite frightened about the situation I would find here. But there has been significant progress. I was impressed in what I found a year ago. There's been, even within 1 year, there's been significant consolidation and conservation of monuments. This includes graffiti removal, crack monitoring. How many crack monitors are there now? Monitoring the movement of the buildings. There was quite a lot of graffiti, which has now been removed. Even so, there's been some security doors installed, because the monuments were just open. Some additional pictures of the work that has been ongoing. A lot of the work has been on the more minor monuments. But the work extended beyond the monuments to some of the infrastructure. The office, the living quarters for the site manager, weather monitoring stations to monitor the weather. I was here during the installation of one of these weather monitoring stations. It was said earlier, the purchase of motorcycles for security. But even site appearance, the improvement of the site and control of traffic by simple placement of lime-coated rocks. It's a very low cost but effective way to manage traffic. Brush clearing, just improving the appearance of the site. And when people see an improved appearance of the site, they will hesitate to litter. There was the installation of trash cans. But it goes beyond that, because I was here last year, and it was the installation of the trash can, but it was also the site management was talking to people that they encountered to say, please use the trash can. So it went beyond just installing the trash can. but it was also the purchase of a little truck to clear the trash cans. So it was a complete process. I was quite impressed with that. And even in the course of 2 weeks, I saw a difference. And now I haven't seen the site today, but I imagine there's been a big difference just in litter. There was some training happening. After I left last year, there were some students being trained in monitoring the cracks at different monuments. Inventory control of fallen original fabric, some tiles. We did a program where we documented the tile, stored the tile that had fallen, and photographed and documented it. We also did some sessions last year on documentation with CAD drawings. And I think the results, as you saw earlier in the video, were quite impressive. You have a lot of before and after photos that show the progress. And there were a lot on the way into the tent. Before and after, some of the storage of original materials, cleaning of some of the plinths, the documentation. We did some CAD work and the documentation. One of the recommendations from UNESCO and the reactive monitoring mission was to pursue this documentation, to have complete photographic documentation. And I saw that big book presented earlier, and I was so impressed that there's all this significant documentation that's happening. So this is a list, and the list goes on and on about a lot of the work that's been happening. But it also goes beyond that, because there will be some additional training in the next few weeks. The site manager will go to the ICROM Stone course in Mexico later this year. They've stopped the large buses from accessing the site. I was quite impressed when the management of the Department of Archaeology went to present their case in Poland at the World Heritage Congress. I think that went a long way to show that they're committed to preservation of the site. And then we have an engineer scheduled to visit Jamna Zamadin in February. This 2 weeks we're going to prepare some documentation for him. There's a lot of work that has to be done, though. I think this is only a little bit of the work. It's 1 year of intense work, but there's a lot more that has to happen. One aspect that I was impressed with is the intangible aspects of the site. And I've read all this documentation from UNESCO, all of the reactive monitoring reports, state of conservation reports. None of them list how much the site is used. It's not a necropolis. I hear it described as a necropolis, a dead city. It's very much a living city. It's a living site. Because I was living on site for 2 weeks last year, I saw how much it was used. There are thousands of people that come every day to the site. We created a map of all of these sites and all of the shrines. And I was quite impressed that there are 12 active shrines on the site. So what is in the intangible heritage? It's the communities and groups that interact with the tangible heritage. Individuals recognize this as part of their heritage. And it's something that's never mentioned in any of these reports or documentation. And it's a sense of identity and community. And I think it goes a long way, this conference, to showing that there's this intangible heritage. And we have to make sure that UNESCO knows this and others know this that visit. So why is this important? Because this is Jamna Zamadin, right? When you have people enjoying the heritage, when you have people there, because if we fix this monument today, if we conserve this monument today, and nobody cares about it, it will die eventually after we die. So we have to make sure that the young people know about it and that people appreciate it. I did some searches on Google Images of Makli and people, and I came up with some amazing pictures. And these are the pictures I like the best, when you have people there enjoying the monuments. Some additional picures. While I was here last year, this led to some very good exchanges, because we were working on site, we were documenting the problems, and these two guys were very inspired. They said, "What are you doing?" And there was a really good interaction, and that's what's the intangibles about, to engage them they were there to enjoy the view, but to engage them and tell them that Makli is in danger. as part of our work, we took a map of Makli and we made a note of all of these places that are active shrines. And I was impressed that the site management and the Department of Archaeology, they've begun to engage the caretakers of these sites, of these caretakers of the shrines, because they're carrying out their own repairs, sometimes using non-appropriate materials. And this is something that was not in any of the documentation before. This is some pictures. As we went around to each of these shrines last year, there was an engagement in, if you need advice, if you need materials, we can help with that. They have the expertise, the Department of Archaeology. And there were a lot of discussions as we went around to these active shrines. So Makli is not a dead city, it's a living place. And it's important because this makes it much, much harder to manage. And this is not in any of the documentation, as I say again. It makes it harder to maintain and manage because you have thousands of people visiting every day. You have traffic. You need to provide facilities such as toilets, rubbish removal, interpretation. There's an impact on conservation because the monuments are moved. And you must create a visitor management plan to guide these people. And the intangible values must be identified and preserved as well as the tangible values. So to conclude, at the 40th session of the World Heritage Congress, the World Heritage Congress expressed its appreciation for the significant efforts of the state party, the government of Sindh, in turning around the situation here. But there's a lot more that has to be done. There has to be short and long-term training programs for the staff. There needs to be extensive baseline documentation, another inventory system. The management plan has to be finalized. And then, of course, you have the monuments that are very significant, like Jam Nizam Nadin, that must be stabilized. So there's a lot that has been done, but there's much more that must be done. There has been a lot, I've met a lot of very dedicated people here. It's very inspiring to me. But it's something, these next steps that will take time and continued effort. I think that the management here cannot rest. They have to keep pushing forward. But they must be recognized for their effort. And that this intangible aspect of the monuments, how people use it, that has to be documented and recognized. And in the next report to UNESCO and the next reports, this intangible aspect must be recorded and transmitted. And they must know that the site is being used actively. And it's something that makes management much more difficult. Well, thank you very much. And I want to leave you with one photo as I was doing my search of images of Makli, which I quite liked, which sums up this, that the monuments are there and they need to be preserved, but we also need to preserve the connection with people. Thank you.
Title of my presentation is Origin, History and Development of Canopy Architecture in Thatta. So this is how I will go along with my presentation. First I will be discussing very briefly because due to the shortage of time, I don't have much time to spend much time on discussing the origin history. So the first part will be about history and origin and history of canopy, Chhatri, and then how this ceremonial umbrella or Chhatri was transformed into architecture and when it took place, followed by origin and history of canopy architecture in Thatta, and finally I will conclude my presentation by focusing again on the Chhatri at Thatta. So if we want to trace the origin of canopy or Chhatri, the first time the ceremonial use or umbrella appeared in Egyptian murals, and then later on we have some evidence from Assyrian art, and then it reached the Greek And then in Greek civilization, there were some depiction and representations of umbrella, which were used as a mark of distinction in Greek civilization. And then later on, we find some representation at Persepolis, the best representation of umbrella, as it is called in Persian, I think, chad.